Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Didn't Sign Up for This, the show where all of life's questions are answered and all your dreams come true. Carrie, what have we got?
Hey, Tim. I would like to talk about the difference in wealth and riches tonight. I think that there are so many of us that get into the rat race and we start to build our careers, and we think about getting that money, having that nest egg so that we can retire or live out the rest of our days doing what we've wanted to do our whole lives, which, that's a different podcast. But I want to talk about the difference, because we're chasing wealth, and we think we're chasing wealth, and we're actually chasing riches. So we're chasing that monetary, whether it equates to security, or you just want the hot sports car that you trade in every couple of years so that you have the up and coming, or you're early adopters for, any of the technology that comes out. And so you're paying that top dollar, you're working your life away, paying those credit card bills, trading for this, borrowing for that. And somewhere along the lines, you forget the wealth part of it.
So define that for me. How do you define wealth?
Wealth, in my opinion, wealth is what you take with you when you leave this earth, and riches are what you leave behind.
That sounds like a poem in the making.
Well, I can't be poetic.
That's deep.
So,
wealth, is that what you should take with you? Anyway, sorry. Riches. Left to corrupt and bow or rust and whatever, I can't remember. Anyway, okay.
No,
but like in very practical terms, what's the difference between riches and wealth?
Riches it's the material aspect, where wealth is the relationships that you have with people, how you treat people, how they treat you, those moments that, we're all staring through a screen to capture every day, all day, so that we can somehow document the wonderful moments in our lives. It's those moments that are worth living and that make you happy, that equate to wealth.
Okay. And do those two things overlap?
Oh, it's absolutely possible. I think that if you're chasing riches to a point that there's an imbalance in your life, and that's your drive, that monetary equation, I think it's harder to have wealth. But if you can create a balance and strive for those goals, but also remember to stop and take the time to build wealth, absolutely you can have both. It's hard to balance if you're constantly focused on some kind of security, or controlling the outcome, or controlling, the monetary value of anything that you have. But if you put that aside and you're okay with being comfortable, and that has its place, and so you kind of compartmentalize the riches aspect of it, it's easier to obtain wealth.
Yeah, it reminds me of an analogy that I've used over the years, and I'll give you the kind of short version of it right here. And this lends itself to an old, as it often does, Chinese proverb, which has been updated a number of times. And so I'll just give you the version that comes to mind. So there is a man, and he's sitting on the banks of a river fishing. Very good fisherman. He's bringing in a few fish, when a much younger man walks up to him and asks, "How's the fishing?" So the older man says, "It's fine. It's good. You should try it. It's very peaceful. It's wonderful. And I get all these delicious fish at the end of the day." The young man, full of hope and ambition, fire in his eyes, fire in his belly, says, "What you really should do is invest in a boat. Because if you had a boat, you'd be out in the river, further out, where the big fish are, and you could catch the big fish." So the man says, "All right, excellent. What would I do with the big fish?" He's like, "Well, you could sell them at the market, convert them into money, make a lot of money." "Excellent. What would I do with the money?" It's like, "Well, with the money, you could buy another boat, and then you could hire someone to take that boat out and catch even more fish." And what would I do with those fish? Well, sell them in the market. And what would I do with that money? Well, with 2 boats, wouldn't be long until you had 3 boats or 4 and then 8 and then 16. Soon you'd have a whole fleet of boats bringing in thousands and thousands of fish, selling them all in the market, creating tremendous wealth for yourself. Why, I dare say in a very short period of time, you would be able to do absolutely anything you wanted to do. Anything. What would you do, old man, if you could do absolutely anything you wanted to do? And the man said, I'd sit here on the banks of this river and fish. Okay, so the point being, too frequently, we convert our wealth into a more universal medium, i.e. money or riches. We take what is ultimately ours, our time, our lives, our capacity to decide, and we convert it into something that is more recognizably valuable, like currency. When we do that, we lose a tremendous amount of efficiency in the conversion process. I liken it to another story. I'll bore you with another one real quick. There was an old farmer who had an irrigation pond with a rainwater system that collected water into this big irrigation pond. The problem was he was on a flat farm. And so in order to get the water to the crops, he had to pump it out. The problem is he could not pump it out fast enough. And so he had to figure a way to be able to pump the water into the crops and do so in a more limited space of time. So what he thought was, if I were to build a water tower and pump the water from the pond up into the water tower, then by virtue of the gravity, I would be able to water the crops in a more effective and efficient manner, grow more crops, all of that. And so he had a couple of choices. He decided that the best way to move the water up into the water tower was to use the prevailing winds that blew across the fields every day. That would turn a windmill, which could do one of 2 things. Either pump the water out of the pond into the holding tank through just a mechanical pump system, windmill turns, water pumps up. Or he could convert the wind through the windmill into electricity, which could be stored in batteries, and then the batteries could run an electric pump and accomplish largely the same task. Okay? Now, the only difference is when you convert anything into anything else, you experience loss. So when you convert the kinetic energy of the wind blowing into electricity, you lose about 80% of it. And then when you convert that stored electricity from the batteries back into kinetic energy, i.e. running an electric pump, you lose about 80% of that. So basically you're getting 20% of 20% in terms of the actual energy that it takes to move the water from the pond up to the holding tank. And too many times we do that. We feel like we need to convert our lives into money, put a dollar value representation on what we want to accomplish. And by doing so, we lose a tremendous amount of it. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to just sit on the bank and fish because that's what completes us. Instead, we have to build an empire of fishing vessels so that we can once again, ultimately, return to that thing that we love to do. And so you're right, there is a huge difference between riches, the accumulation of means, versus true wealth, which is the accumulation of happiness and self-actualization.
Well, and I think you see that gap in a greater. It's much greater at the corporate level. The higher up you go in corporations, the harder it is to find someone who is with that spouse that they've been with since college or that they have been with for a very long time, because you tend to skew. I am an ambitious person. I like to get things done. I like to add structure. I know that for myself, I have to make it a process. So everything that I want to accomplish, I make a process. And once I do that, I can put myself in autopilot and I follow my steps to get where I need to go. And so regardless of how you get there, whatever format you use to accomplish goals, there is a personality type out there that will set their goals to the highest degree because that's their personality. They don't know any different. But one of the biggest opportunities you have when you are ambitious or you are setting those goals high is to create that balance. Everybody that has gone to the top, it's all over LinkedIn all the time. All of these executives that I have on my LinkedIn profile or that publish stuff, people that I follow, they all go back to creating balance. So if you listen to the masters, the goal achievers, they come back and say, you need balance. Richard Branson posts more stuff about what it takes to be happy than it does what it takes to build the Virgin Enterprise. That's what he does. Because he has such a pulse check on happiness and savoring those moments, as opposed to people who are rich beyond measure and absolutely miserable. And on spouse number 4, 5, 6, maybe they have a reality show on Bravo. I don't know. That's pretty popular right now. But they're miserable. There's no depth.
Right.
There's no, that moment when something moves you and it just moves you to tears and you feel chills and you whatever you feel when you feel moved. That's what I feel. I get teary-eyed and I feel chills head to toe. Those are the moments you should be striving for. Those are the opportunities you should look for in your life. You can still make money. You can still be successful. No one needs to be a martyr when it comes to the financial realm and what it looks like to build an empire or an industry or to make money. It's okay. I've seen the other side of that too, where you have these people that are so engaged with wealth that they're too humble to go for riches. And then they struggle, but they have beautiful moments in life, except when they have to pay the bills and they can't make ends meet and they have to sacrifice or they have to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. And so that imbalance can go both ways, but you have to be able to create a balance. And that does come back to knowing what you want. It's just like the man in your story. Why would he go through all of the hassle and all the pain and all the process and all the frustration and all the maintenance and all the workers and everything just to make money so that he could go right back to where he was, probably exhausted, and sleep half the day instead of fish because he's so tired? And I've been there. Stephen Covey has the 4 quadrants. Have you ever seen that chart where it's like, and it talks about productivity and your capacity and where you are on that scale. And I love that visual because if you get out of balance, then, you're working Monday through Friday, who knows how many hours. You're probably logging into your email on vacations and your voicemail and everything that you're doing to stay connected. And then when you go on vacation, you sleep half of it away.
Right.
Or you work half of it.
I don't know. There are a precious few people out there who just really thoroughly enjoy that behavior they're engaged in for work. And so engaging with your business, whatever that might be, and everything that anybody does, one way or another, you're bringing productivity or you're taking a risk. Those are the only 2 things in life that pay. You've either got to produce something and or take a risk in order to get paid. And I've yet to find anything that really defies that notion ultimately, other than, like if you're living off the tax dollar. And I won't get into that. I am a firm believer, however, that people do not want money. If you were to stop 100 people on the street and ask them, what do you want? 95 of them would say money. It would come back to money very, very rapidly. Anyone that you pose that question to a little bit deeper, though, would freely admit that they don't want money. Nobody wants money. They want what the money can buy, which has to do with how they feel and their relationships and their opportunity to live their life. We are taught to want money by a consumerist society wherein that is the default. People who want money because they just can't think of anything else to want. But they figure if you store whatever value they've produced in the form of money, when they do pull their head out and figure out exactly what it is they want, they'll be able to somehow purchase it. And it is an incredibly inefficient means of living your life. Just living by default, whatever comes. Just put more money in that account, and one day I'll go on Princess Cruise Lines, right? I'll eat the buffet, and once we get 300 miles offshore, I'm going to gamble. It's going to be awesome one day, right? But that's a person who hasn't taken the time or the energy to sit down with themselves and say, hey, me, what the hell do you want? What are you doing here? And it's very easy to ignore, right? You go to work in the morning and you work all day and you come home at night and you just want to kind of blob out in front of the tube, maybe drink a beer, right? That's the story of everybody in the middle class, or even the upper middle class, or even upper class. You're drinking the really nice beer, but still, you don't know what you want. And so you just keep chasing money, hoping one day you'll figure out what you want, but you never will because you haven't had that conversation with yourself.
I agree with that. I think that we all want different things, but I think we also aren't really in tune with it because we put ourselves in autopilot a lot of times. And that's detrimental to your progression. You can't do that.
Well, I think we don't ask ourselves the question. We don't ask ourselves the question of what do I want? And that's the underlying problem. The man on the shores of the river knew exactly what he wanted. And he was taking it, having it. He didn't need a giant house built on the riverfront. He just wanted to go sit on the banks and fish. That he knew what he wanted. That's the whole driving point of the analogy. Most people just have no clue. So they just think, money. I'll make more money and one day I'll figure out what I want.
I would venture to say that it would be easier to get a response from people on what they don't want. I would say that a lot of people focus so much on what they don't want that they actually will create it for themselves.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe you manifest things in your life or chase things or you're aware. Once you establish what you want or what you don't want, you start to look for it. And that's the most dangerous part of the human condition, is that once you establish a focal point, and you can say, but I do want this and I don't want that. But not wanting is the same as wanting, because all you're doing is establishing a focal point. Once you focus on your focal point, your brain, body, spirit, consciousness entity goes to work to create whatever is under the lens of that focal point.
Well, and we trick ourselves into thinking that we have all of this time, that we can waste time because we have time. And that's not necessarily the case. We don't know how much time we have. And so you have to take action. You have to take action with a sense of urgency if you're going to create what you want in your life. You have to move away from focusing on what you don't want, turn that into focusing on what you do want. When I do an exercise I have whiteboards and Post-it notes because it's my go-to. So in my recording room and meditation room, I have whiteboards, and the very first thing that I have written on there is, what do I want? That's the first step. And then you define what your priorities are and what needs to be done. So what actions do you take to get what you want? And then you have to tie it into the result. And if you can't include happiness or fulfillment in the results for the actions and what you want, you need to reanalyze what you want. Because we need happiness and we need to be fulfilled. Money's subjective, success is subjective. You can't let others dictate how you're going to drive success and how you're going to live your own life. You can be in a relationship and there's some accountability from a relationship perspective, or, you have to, if you're working at a job, you have to, there's some rules that you have to follow and things that you have to do. You can't just throw caution to the wind, and, there are moments of compromise, but ultimately you can't let anybody define your own story. You can't let anybody else write that for you, because then it's their story.
Well, okay, you can't if you want to truly be happy, but people do that all the time.
Oh, I know.
People let others or other people in their lives, or the computer or the television, people let YouTube define what they want, because they're unable or unwilling to take the time to write out that definition for themselves. And so what do I want? I want, a big butt and full lips like the Kardashian girls or whatever, right? Because that's what's in front of me, because that's what's Instagramming. According to Instagram, this is what I want. More makeup, a big butt. That's what I want. Right? Because if I didn't want it, why would so many other people want it? And if so many other people didn't want it, why would, these people have 100 billion followers or whatever, right? And so because we're unable or unwilling to sit down with ourselves and have the scary conversation, and that's the biggest underlying problem that I see in the world, is that we just are unwilling to have the big conversation, the coming out party, right? And I don't care who you are. Everybody's in a closet to some degree. And I'm not just talking about gender or sexuality or any of the reptilian stuff. I'm talking about like deep, meaningful stuff, the spiritual stuff. I don't believe in the religion I grew up in, and I got to come out. I got to have that coming out party. Or I didn't really want to be an attorney, but I've got 12 years wrapped up in just the education, $400,000 in tuition. I've been slaving away at it for 15 years now, just breaking even, just getting to the point where I'm paying for the education. It's about paid off. But guess what? It sucks. Now that's coming from a real person, a real client that I work with. And she doesn't want to be an attorney. But she's got no go-to. She's got no backup plan, no plan B, because her old man was an attorney, and she just decided, well, we're attorneys in this family, and that's what we do. And I'm sure I will just love it. But she didn't love it. And now she's not spring chicken, right? She's 38, and she's trying to figure out how to get out of the law profession.
It's crazy. Going back to everybody wants big butts and big lips like the Kardashians, I would venture to say that is the medium that they're using, because ultimately what they want is to be recognized and accepted. And that could be the same thing with your friend who's a lawyer. She was looking for that recognition and acceptance from her father, and it's very easy to follow in your father's footsteps and get that. It makes it very easy. And so we're all running around injecting who knows what into our bodies, and just to be accepted or recognized, and I think it's funny, but I'll give you a funny example. I was with a friend of mine this last weekend, and I said something about Prescott, Arizona, and she said, just to give you a heads up, if you want to sound more like a local, it's Prescott. Everybody here says Prescott. Nobody says Prescott. And I said, well, I'm not from Arizona, and I think Prescott sounds stupid. I don't like the way it sounds. So I'm going to say Prescott. And she just started laughing. But that's the truth. I don't like the way it sounds. You want to say, I say pecans. I say pecan pie. I put pecans in my protein shake this morning. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. But I'm not sure that I would have been that way 15 years ago. Because you have to get to this moment where you go, what I want with my life is way more important than what you think I should want. So I'm going to say Prescott and pecans. And if people don't like it, well, clearly I mispronounced P words. So, but, it's coming out of my mouth, and she said it as a kind of a, if you just want to be, well, no, I don't. I'm not from here. I was raised in South Carolina, and I'm proud to be a Southerner, and I'm going to say Prescott. Y'all. But it was just funny. And, we laughed it off, and she thought it was funny. And, but somebody that's looking for acceptance might even change how they say a word.
Yeah.
Or
okay. And so just to play devil's advocate, the other side of that is to say, do the locals get to decide, right? I had a friend, not long after I moved out here who would incessantly correct me that the name of that state where Las Vegas is called Nevada, right? Mm-hmm. I, of course, say Nevada because it's Nevada. And then she very astutely pointed out, no, it's actually whatever the locals decide it is because it's their local place and their local culture. Okay. And at the end of the day, just to kind of look at it from the other side.
Yeah.
I think if you're changing your pronunciation of a given word because you want to blend in and be accepted and that sort of thing, I think you're absolutely right. Life's too short, man. Just say what you got to say. If, however, you insist on saying it your way because the rest of them are wrong,
no,
then you are from the South.
That's right. No, it's not that. Everybody's welcome to say what they want. I mean, of course there are times like where you use grammar incorrectly, or not you, but just like people might use grammar incorrectly, and I'm not that person that corrects them, but it's funny. It's always funny to watch when people do. And it's interesting because I think it comes from a place of judgment. I'm going to judge how you say something as opposed to listening to what you say. And I don't mean my friend, but I mean when people interject and they insist on being right and having the best story and, all of those things. And really just make an allowance for people to express their individuality. And, if they're not that great in English, maybe they're better in math. I mean, let people live a little bit, but.
Well, and I know, I've read YouTube comments, right? So I've bumped into the word Nazis, right? Mm-hmm. The problem with the word Nazi is, rather than trying to have a dialogue about something, which, number one, don't waste your time leaving comments on YouTube channels. It's just absolutely ridiculous, right? I made that mistake a few years back and, swore I'd never do it again. I actually got into a little spat with a guy. The last time I ever left a YouTube comment, got into a spat with a guy over whether or not my little Down syndrome boy was sterile, would be able to have children or not, because he was trying to make a point about evolution. And man, he was just hell bent on his atheistic standpoint. And if you're an atheist, God bless you. All right. I mean that in the best way. Anyway, That's terrible. I really don't. I'm not out there to pick apart somebody's belief system or what they choose to believe. Like, I don't care. My beliefs are none of your business and your beliefs are none of mine. So I really don't care. But this particular individual was just like so absolutely driven to support his beloved Richard Dawkins, that he just starts making stuff up. Now, according to my boy's pediatrician, the overwhelming likelihood is about a 97% chance he is sterile. And even if he had a chance to get busy, and we're still hoping, heaven knows he is. Don't tell Kayla. Anyway, Kayla knows who she is. It's the sweetest girl in the world. Anyway, it's just this young lady who my boy has a crush on. So, at any rate, it's about a 97% chance, according to his pediatrician and every doctor I've ever talked to about this subject matter, that he cannot reproduce. Down syndrome females can reproduce more frequently, but Down syndrome males just cannot, right? It's part of the condition. So this guy, in the interest of making his point, which is that mutations, he was making a point about natural mutations in the genetic code, and as an example, he used Down syndrome being a mutation in the genetic code, which in fact it is. My point was, okay, can you point out a genetic mutation that makes us stronger or better, and doesn't lead to, in this case, total human extinction, right? And he goes on to tell me that, oh, your boy's not sterile. He just doesn't have very many opportunities to engage in sexual activity, and that's why he likely will never have a child. It's purely a product of his opportunities. And I'm like, dude, it's not. It's like his junk don't work, right? It's not about opportunity. It's about the fact that, biochemically, he will not reproduce. He's sterile. And so this guy just goes into this big tirade about how he's a medical professional. And I'm like, what medical profession exactly? And so I start stalking this guy to try to win an argument. Come to find out, he's a medical professional, right? God bless him. Nothing against him. Nothing wrong with good, hard, blue-collar work. But he's an orderly, right? He's mopping up poop and vomit. And so he's representing himself as a medical professional online. And I guess technically, I park cars out the hospital, and thusly I am a medical professional. I am also an automotive professional, right? And it's like, dude, no, come on. You can't represent yourself as a medical professional. Anyway, sorry for that crazy tangential tirade, but I'll bring it back around. Largely, if you understand what someone is saying in their YouTube comment, maybe English is not their first language, it doesn't matter. You understand what they're saying, even though they used then when they meant than.
Right.
Address the point, not the semantics. Yes, we should write proper English. Oftentimes we don't. But if you have written enough improper English for me to understand your point, unless I cannot refute your point or agree to support your point, then I should not just turn to the letters you used or whatever improper words or punctuation you used to say it. That's just ridiculous.
Well, and I think that's a good point, because who made the audience the expert on the content? Like, we're talking, it's not a spelling bee, it's not a test, it's a YouTube channel that somebody's commenting on. And I've seen that too, or I've seen people be downright rude about what they're watching. Don't watch it. If you don't like it, don't watch it. But we have way too many experts and not enough people that are willing to commiserate and compromise and listen. And so maybe, just maybe, if people were chasing wealth instead of riches, we would have more balance in how we treat each other as well. Because with wealth, with chasing wealth and having those moments that matter, the more moments you have that matter in your life, the less superficial stuff you will try to obtain.
Well, and we have this mistaken philosophy or paradigm that the acceptance of others is somehow important. You know, I heard it put, I can't remember who said this, but something to the nature of, we spend money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. And I really think it's a trap for most people. It's just it is the church of consumerism at any cost. And you get caught in the trap. And you work away your entire life and you never make it down to the banks of the river to fish because you're so busy trying to pay for the boat that you can't afford the time to go fishing in, simply by virtue of the fact that you have the boat. You buy the boat to improve the experience. You make payments on the boat and pay insurance on the boat, buy gas for the boat and store the boat and maintain the boat. And that requires extra effort and labor, work on your part. Whereas if you would forego the boat entirely and just go down to the banks of the river and decide if you even like to fish, most people never find out because they never ask the questions. They never do the experiments. They never go through that programmatic way of thinking to define exactly who they want to be in life. And so they just accept whatever comes their way by virtue of default, which 95 times out of 100 is, I just make more money and hopefully happiness will find me. And it just doesn't work.
Well, I think it's interesting because in 2013, there was an article published about research at Columbia University. And the results of this research stated that younger people who are rich, so they make over their average household income is over $170,000 a year, are 2 times as likely to be treated for depression and anxiety than those of their peers that make less money. See, what people fail to understand is the memories are made in the struggle. You can make memories in the bliss and in the attainment, but the strength and the memories and the hustle and the bustle and the sweat and the blood and the tears, that's all made, and that all equates to your character in the struggle.
Right. Well, because absent the challenge, it's just not worthwhile to you. Anything that you get easily, we've said this before, that which is gained too easily is esteemed too little. We just don't care about it. If you hand me something, thank you. It's awesome. And it's that toy on Christmas morning that gets played with for a half an hour and then cast aside, eventually down in the basement, and there it is. How many remote control cars have I hauled out of that basement and taken to Goodwill? Because they're Christmas presents. Nothing against Christmas, but they're just hollow, empty things that don't require any level of effort or work. As opposed to the things that even I think of my own children, as well as myself, but things that I own, that they own, that I've seen them work and struggle to attain. And those things get used. Those things get carefully placed on the top shelf and taken care of. And that's just part of the human condition.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're running out of time quickly, but I really want to talk about how do we achieve that balance. So we've defined the difference in riches and wealth, and we've talked about what that looks like and how people act when they're chasing one over the other. But how does our audience balance? I can't quit my job and sit on my porch all day because it's going to make me happy. I have to work. How do people create that balance?
They define it first. Because I think anybody who sits down quite seriously thinking, who am I? What do I want? What mark do I leave in the world? How am I remembered? What's my legacy? It's not going to be, oh, you were that dude who sat on the porch drinking beer for 40 years. right? Nobody aspires to that because that doesn't make us happy. As you've astutely pointed out, what makes us happy is, in fact, the challenge. It's the work. You know, the exercise that I would do with clients, and I've done it for years, I would have them tell me, what's your favorite sport? And they would name a sport. And it can be absolutely any sport. It doesn't matter. Baseball, okay? It's baseball. Because I did this with Gator not long ago. Favorite sport, obviously, is baseball. It's like, okay, so close your eyes. You're going to imagine something. Imagine that you were playing baseball and you were having the absolute game of your life. You can't miss a single pitch. You can't miss a single swing of the bat. You're 3-4 home runs into it. It's only the 6th inning. You have not committed error one. You're catching every ball. You happen to know that there are college scouts in the stands. And man, you just can't help but think that they are taking notes on you, right? Best game ever. Best game ever. Now, I want you to look over at the opposing dugout and notice that the opposing team, bunch of little leaguers. They're 8, 9, 10 years old. They can't throw the ball half as fast as you can. They can't hit any pitch you throw because you're twice their size. You're half again as old as they are. Bigger, faster, stronger. The level of the game is profoundly higher. Is it still the best game you've ever had? No, because there's no challenge. There's no opponent to rise to the occasion. If you do not have challenge to meet with ability, then the ability is just wasted. You didn't even need to show up. Any 4 guys on that state championship ball team, junior high team, could have beat any 9 guys in any of those little league teams. And it's just the truth. Because they can't hit your pitch, and you can hit every one of theirs. And so, if we don't have adequate challenge, our lives are effectively wasted.
You know, I think it does come down to focusing on the process. You can define the goal, but your key objective is to focus on the process that you need to follow to obtain the goal. Because I can identify goals for myself all day long. But also if you have friends or family in your life who you look to as a support system, make sure they're good ones. You know, it's always a struggle for me when I meet with a client and I talk to them about their relationship with their spouse and they give me more reasons why the spouse would not support their efforts versus being a partner in their evolution. And that's a huge detractor. How are you going to get past your own obstacles if the person that loves you the most is throwing additional obstacles in your way? It's not okay. And that conversation is a real conversation that has to take place. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is you cannot compare yourself to other people. This is your opportunity to create your own life. And it doesn't matter what the Kardashians are doing. It doesn't matter what Tom down the street is doing. It doesn't matter what, anybody that you have in your life. Stop comparing your life to other people because we don't always see everything that goes on. As a matter of fact, the majority of the times we don't. And if you will stop comparing, then it releases jealousy. It releases a lot of the pride and the ego-driven responses that you're going to run into and encounter if you don't.
And I would say stopping that comparison process is very easy once you define your destination. Once you define where you want to be. If you went up to anybody on the street and said, hey, tell me something. How are you going to get there? They're going to say, get where? They're going to look like you're an idiot, right? So it's not just methodology to get there. Methodology to get there is incredibly important. It is second only to where you are going. But you have to define the where I'm going, what I want out of life, what I want this experience to be. And as long as people keep avoiding that, they will keep comparing themselves to whomever, you know? They will sit back and go, man, that Caitlyn Jenner's got a nice butt.
Oh, yes, she
Nothing against Caitlyn, but I'm just, you know, she's a Kardashian girl now, so, you know, all due respect. Parting thoughts?
I agree with you. You have to define what you want. That's the first step. If you can't get to a point to understand what you want, then you can't get anywhere from where you are right now. And be in tune with your feelings. Oh my gosh, we do everything we can to numb ourselves. And you have to be in tune with your feelings. You have to be able to share them. Share feelings with people that matter to you. Life's too short. That's all I got.
My parting thought is you do not need permission to be who you are. You do not need permission to become who you want to be. You are the world's foremost authority on what you think and feel. You are the absolute, irrevocable, permanent, benevolent dictator of your own life. Go dictate.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks as always for showing up. It's been fun. We will get back together as always in a few days and talk about it again. If you have any questions, hit us up via social media. I didn't sign up for this on Facebook is probably your best bet. And we will see you next time. Until then, dream your life
and live your dreams.
Talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.